Did you know that years ago, there was a call for a comprehensive and unified policy and program for Philippine sports? A covenant that will accelerate the promotion and development of sports in various sectors of the country. Sounds familiar? Yes or no? Here's all you need to know about the National Sports Summit 2021, a project which is pinned on a similar endeavor held in Baguio City in 1992 via Executive Order Number 27, which created a 38-point resolution to guide Philippine sports. Fast forward to 2019, under the guidance of Philippine Sports Commission Chairman William Ramirez, PSC started planning a project which would help present and future sports leaders to have a well-studied guide on the direction the sports community need to take, crafted by the stakeholders themselves, with a theme of sports convergence symbolizing the coming together of minds and interest from different stakeholders from various parts of the country, united in the goal of coming up with measures to better Philippine sports, a sports convergence. The NSS 2021 is a three-phase project aimed to gather data on different aspects touching the sporting community, process and study these information, and craft a research-based resolution which will serve as a guideline for the advancement of Philippine sporting community. Let's jump right into the first phase of the project. Starting this January 27, Sports Conversations is a weekly online conference featuring different sports topics aimed to provide both learning and awareness on the present situation of sports, as well as a chance to discuss these topics with participants coming from different sports client groups. This lecture forum would be presided over by key figures and experts in the field, and will be concluded by an open forum to gather insights and views, concluded with a synthesis of the discussions per session. With a targeted 25 lectures on Phase 1, gathered data will be processed on its second phase, giving important consideration to the very first NSS resolutions as reference. The product of this data processing will be presented to the Philippine Sports Commission Board for necessary actions. We will go back online for the final phase of the project. A series of online consultations will be done with the different groups of stakeholders, aimed to check and validate the data that was processed, and create a new set of resolutions which will craft a well-studied short, mid, and long-term goals for the sports community to follow or serve as a roadmap. As PSC Chairman William Ramirez puts it, the PSC believes that sports are a means to move forward despite the challenges ahead. The National Sports Summit gives us the opportunity of charting our path in bettering Philippine sports. Now that you know everything, we invite you to join and take part in the National Sports Summit 2021. Good morning, everyone, and welcome for those who are already inside our platform for this morning. Again, we are requesting everyone to be muted during this time. as we prepare for the opening ceremonies of the National Sports Summit 2021. Also, if you may, our virtual background is also available in our chat box right now. If you wish to apply the virtual background of the National Sports Summit, you may. Also, we are also reminding our participants to use the naming convention. Kindly rename to your affiliation / first name and last name. Again, we are kindly asking everyone to be muted at this time. Our opening ceremonies for the National Sports Summit will also be streaming live on our social media platforms later. And if you wish to follow us on our social media accounts on Facebook, PSC open and close parenthesis Philippine Sports Commission. On Twitter, we also have at PSC_gov. And on Instagram, it's at phil.sportscommission. We'll also be uploading the highlights of our first session today on our YouTube channel, so you might want to check that as well. And again, would like to welcome everyone who are already inside. We're still waiting for some. And again, I think we're all muted as of this time. I can see the faces this morning. I think all have had a great sleep. And I'm really seeing our sports stakeholders present. Magandang umaga po sa inyo from our sports stakeholders from various parts of the country. And I would just like to recognize, I think we have here today, I believe we have our sports educators. We also have coaches and trainers and instructors present with us. Students are also here. So if you're a student, kindly wave if you're a student. I think I'm seeing you also. We also have athletes joining us this morning. We have our local government officials and partners as well. In the medical field, I think we have sports medical professionals also attending this event. And media friends also. I think we have media friends inside. Magandang umaga rin po sa inyong lahat. And as we wait for the start of our opening ceremonies, we start promptly at 9 a.m. So as we wait, please kindly observe our reminders to be muted and to kindly change to our naming convention to affiliation / your first name and last name. Gaano kasaya yung pinaramdam?
Ano ba ang halaga ng saya? Hanggang saan ang kaya nating ibigay upang sila ay lumikaya? Eksaktong 19 na buwan ang nakalipas nang unang idinaos ng Philippine Sports Commission ang Children's Games Sports for Peace sa bayan ng Iligan City para sa mga batang inilikas mula sa giyera ng Marawi. Kasabay ng walang humpay na putok ng baril at bomba, buong tapang na sinuong ng mga PSC staff ang digmaan upang makapaghatid ng pag-asa at sigla sa mga bata ng Marawi at mag-iwan ng pangako na muling babalik at magbibigay ng ngiti sa kanilang mga labi. Dala ang pag-asa na muling babangon sa lusak na idinulot ng gyera, 500 batang Muslim, Indigenous at Kristiyano ang nagkaisa, nagsama-sama at naglaro ng basketball, volleyball, football, table tennis, frisbee at iba pang larong Pinoy sa Mindanao State University.
of PSA, headed by our chairman, William Chairman, we would like to express our gratitude sa MSU for hosting, for being a partner to our program. Hindi lang po ito yung programa na ibibigay namin sa inyo sa City of Manila. Marami po kami mga programa na ibibigay ko sa inyo. Hopefully next year makabalik ulit kami dito. Ayusin po natin yung mga ibang programa namin.
Hanggang saan ang kaya nating ibigay upang sila ay lumigaya? Patuloy na naniniwala ang PSC na ang bawat batang Pilipino ang susi sa kapayapaan at mabuting kinabukasan ng Pilipinas. Hanggat may batang nais maglaro, ay mayroon tayong responsibilidad na ibahagi ang sports sa bawat Pilipino.
It was a fresh shot clock for Team Philippines, with 18 seconds remaining in the fourth. Carlos Loizaga holds on to the ball, wasting away the time. Fans up on their feet, smelling a momentous Filipino win. The buzzer sounded. The place erupted in victorious roar. Built in 1934, the Rizal Memorial Coliseum is one of the two indoor sporting arenas located at the 8-hectare Rizal Memorial Sports Complex, an Art Deco sports facility designed by Filipino architect Juan Arellano.
Maraming basketball dito ginanap sa Rizal Memorial Coliseum. Nika, Naasco, WNCA, Pusa. Napakaraming nanonood dito noon. Talagang punong-puno.
The Coliseum is a silent witness to some of the greatest moments in Philippine basketball and other sporting events. At the 1954 Manila ASEAN, Philippine men's basketball team led by Carlos Loizaga, Antonio Henato, and Lauro Mumar pulled off an upset win against powerhouse China to win the gold medal, 34-27, in front of 8,000 basketball fans. In the 1981 Southeast Asian Games, our Filipino Cagers dominated Thailand 91-74 in the gold medal match. The 94 by 50 feet court of the Coliseum housed some of the long-running and popular leagues we have today.
Dito naglalaro nung araw. Kaya itong Rizal, napakahalaga nito. Hindi dapat tanggalin. Hindi ito dapat mawala. Kasi para sa mga bata na nadiligaw na landas, lalo na yung mga nagdodroga, para dito sa mga bata po. Talagang itong Rizal Memorial, laging puno ito pag may laro. Pag basketball, boxing, kung ano man, cheering competition, dito ginaganap. Talaga naman napupuno ito ng araw.
The Manila Industrial and Commercial Athletic Association, the first major basketball league in the country, held games at the Coliseum from 1938 to 1981. The UAAP from 1938 to 2002, NCAA from 1938 to 2006, and the Philippine Basketball Association from 1975 to 1982. Four-time PBA Most Valuable Player and now PSA Commissioner Ramon Fernandez recalls some of his greatest moments in the historic arena.
Rizal Memorial Coliseum is really a very memorable place for me. The very first time that I played at the Rizal Memorial Coliseum was, I think, way back 1971. I became a member of the FIBA youth team, of the Asian youth team, when I was 18 years old, way back in 1972. Hindi ko makalimutan talaga during the parade as the Philippines entered, tumayo yung mga balahibo ko. Rizal, iba ang talaga ng Rizal, ang crowd ng Rizal Memorial Coliseum. Those who come here were the real basketball buffs. Different lang talaga. It's hard to describe, but you could see the passion of the Filipino basketball lovers. I think there's, I don't know if it's an executive order or a law, that structures above 50 years old ay dapat protektado na hindi na pwedeng gibahin. Of course, I was not in favor because even if we set up a new National Training Center in Tarlac, in Capas or Subic, this should be maintained pa rin. In fact, that's the direction the PSC is taking now. Refurbish natin lahat ng facilities dito.
A scene of victory and pride. The Rizal Memorial Coliseum was and forever will be the stage for the country's brightest athletes.
I am Ramon Fernandez, one of the commissioners of the Philippine Sports Commission. I am sports positive.
February 1945. Rapid gunfires and explosions surrounded a devastated baseball park in Manila. As the last Japanese force tried to survive the onslaught of American forces. The place stands a silent witness of the bloodbath known as the Battle of the Ballpark. The Rizal Memorial Baseball Stadium in the 8-hectare Rizal Memorial Sports Complex is an Art Deco sports facility designed by renowned Filipino architect Juan Arellano, who also designed the Manila Metropolitan Theater and the Cebu Provincial Capitol. It was inaugurated in 1934 in time for the country's hosting of the 10th edition of the Far Eastern Championship Games from May 16 to 20 that year. This was incidentally the last edition of the Games.
Southeast Asian Games, 1991 at saka 2005, every hosting natin. At saka Asia softball, men and women.
American Major League All-Stars led by legendary hitters Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig visited the ballpark and competed against the Philippine Olympic team with Reginio Portucion at the pitch. In front of more than 10,000 Filipino fans, the Iron Horse Gehrig and the King of Swing Ruth made the historic first and second home runs on the Rizal baseball grounds, which are still marked on the walls of the field to this day.
Every hosting may renovation para maging presentable sa ano natin, siyempre, Philippines, di ba? Mostly.
The Second World War brought massive destructions in Manila. The baseball stadium was not spared, but like a phoenix that rises from the ashes, it was rebuilt to its former glory on January 1946. In 2005, the ballpark was again refurbished for the country's hosting of the 23rd Southeast Asian Games. From the first day it opened, the Rizal Memorial Baseball Stadium became the home of both elite and amateur Filipino hitters and many memorable events. Today, it is now being used as training field of the Philippine Blue Girls and Blue Boys baseball team and the national softball team. The stands, which can accommodate 10,000 spectators, has also played host to other non-sports events like the legendary Bon Jovi concert on September 30, 1993, and the big prayer meetings of the El Shaddai movement in the early 2000s.
This nahawakan ko to 1993. So napamahal na ako dito. Kaya minsan pag ay mahaba na. Nakakaiyak yung pag nakita mo yung Major League.
With the National Historical and Cultural Commission's declaration of Resolution Number 5, Series of 2017, naming it a National Historical Landmark, it is now protected by the state to be enjoyed by many generations of Filipinos and will be here to stay for many more years to come.
A blessed day to all our participants on this Wednesday morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. You know, it is really a pleasant sight to see all of our sports leaders, athletes, coaches, PSC employees, media friends, and stakeholders from various parts of the country in today's event. We are also simultaneously streaming the opening ceremonies live on our Facebook account. First, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our VIPs for this morning, our Chairman William Ramirez, our PSC Commissioners, Commissioner Arnold Agustin, Commissioner Celia Kiram, Commissioner Ramon Fernandez, and Commissioner Charles Maxey. Also to the 3rd District Representative of Manila and the Chairman of the House Committee on Youth and Sports, Representative John Martin Yul Servo Nieto, is also with us. I am your host, Joash David Ricanor from the Public Communications Office, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the opening ceremonies of the Philippine Sports Commission's National Sports Summit 2021. May I ask everyone to be in the presence of God as we start with the prayer to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us bow our heads and put ourselves in the loving presence of God. Dear Almighty God, we are beyond grateful to you for the bounty of opportunities and chances you have showered us today. We thank you for always making us feel your presence in everything we do. This online National Sports Summit 2021 became possible through your grace, allowing us to gather our brothers and sisters despite the COVID-19 pandemic. It took us almost a year to finally have this project relaunched, and it took us a number of challenges before we came here. Let your grace flow, that this opening session be fruitful and beneficial for the country's sports community. We also pray that you help us perform our tasks and that we may be guided by our goals throughout the program. Grant our speakers the ability and heart to effectively impart their wealth of knowledge and experience to everyone in this conference. Bless all the participants as well, so that they may have receptive and critical minds to acquire new ideas they can apply in their respective fields as leaders and as members of a bigger community. Your infinite blessing would mean the success of this National Sports Summit. May this activity glorify your name. We ask this through Christ our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
We can all settle down at this time. On behalf of our PSC board, led by Chairman William Butch Ramirez and our four commissioners, Commissioner Aldo Agustin, Commissioner Ramon Fernandez, Commissioner Celia Kiram, and Commissioner Charles Maxey, welcome to the National Sports Summit 2021. We at the PSC are very excited to converse, collaborate, and work with all of the great sports minds present in today's program. But before we get into that, allow us to give you a look-see into our project to help us get settled into what we're all about to embark on. Again, let us all watch this video.
Did you know that years ago, there was a call for a comprehensive and unified policy and program for Philippine sports? A covenant that will accelerate the promotion and development of sports in various sectors of the country. Sounds familiar? Yes or no? Here's all you need to know about the National Sports Summit 2021, a project which is pinned on a similar endeavor held in Baguio City in 1992 via Executive Order Number 27, which created a 38-point resolution to guide Philippine sports. Fast forward to 2019, under the guidance of Philippine Sports Commission Chairman William Ramirez, PSC started planning a project which would help present and future sports leaders to have a well-studied guide on the direction the sports community need to take, crafted by the stakeholders themselves, with a theme of sports convergence symbolizing the coming together of minds and interest from different stakeholders from various parts of the country, united in the goal of coming up with measures to better Philippine sports, a sports convergence. The NSS 2021 is a three-phase project aimed to gather data on different aspects touching the sporting community, process and study these information, and craft a research-based resolution which will serve as a guideline for the advancement of Philippine sporting community. Let's jump right into the first phase of the project. Starting this January 27, Sports Conversations is a weekly online conference featuring different sports topics aimed to provide both learning and awareness on the present situation of sports, as well as a chance to discuss these topics with participants coming from different sports client groups. This lecture forum would be presided over by key figures and experts in the field, and will be concluded by an open forum to gather insights and views, concluded with a synthesis of the discussions per session. With a targeted 25 lectures on Phase 1, gathered data will be processed on its second phase, giving important consideration to the very first NSS resolutions as reference. The product of this data processing will be presented to the Philippine Sports Commission Board for necessary actions. We will go back online for the final phase of the project. A series of online consultations will be done with the different groups of stakeholders, aimed to check and validate the data that was processed, and create a new set of resolutions which will craft a well-studied short, mid, and long-term goals for the sports community to follow or serve as a roadmap. As PSC Chairman William Ramirez puts it, the PSC believes that sports are a means to move forward despite the challenges ahead. The National Sports Summit gives us the opportunity of charting our path in bettering Philippine sports. Now that you know everything, we invite you to join and take part in the National Sports Summit 2021.
All right. As said in the video, now that you know everything about the project, it is only fitting to call the present captain of the PSC ship a sports educator, a coach, a history scholar, and a true sportsman. The man who was relentless in his desires to get this project into fruition, out of his belief on the positive contribution this will give to the Philippine sports. To deliver his welcome remarks, let us all welcome PSC Chairman William Butch Ramirez.
Thank you. Good morning. As Chairman of the Philippine Sports Commission, it is my honor to welcome our guest speakers and all the participants. Thank you for your supports, especially to our present President, Rodrigo Rua Duterte, Senator Bongo and all the senators, Congressman Servo Nieto and all the congressmen, governors and mayors, private sectors. Thank you so much for the support. Looking back, when we assumed office 2016, I brought Hidilyn Diaz to Davao City to the president. And in the course of our conversation, he told me, Butch, wag mong kalimutan yung mga mahihirap, yung mga indigenous, yung mga bata na walang-wala. Find a way that will be able to steer the spirit of this destitute, impoverished community to lift their spirit to have fun, enjoy life about sports, and inspire them to go to school. It is this spirit that we brought into this second sports summit after 1992 when the first summit was held in Baguio, bringing 800 delegates and form a 38-point board resolutions. Today, after 29 years, we will revisit the 38 board resolutions to guide us. And I have to thank many people again. I would like to thank, of course, the president, senators, congressmen, the governors, the mayors, the Department of Education, the Commission on Higher Education, the private schools, student and athletes, as well as the professional, our partners in the private sectors, our partners, the national sports associations, the Philippine Olympic Committee, especially my family, the Philippine Sports Commission, and of course, my strong, very cooperative board. The National Sports Summit 221 is a three-phase project which would help our present and future sports leaders to have a well-studied guide on the directions the sports community needs to take. We hope that from these discussions, we could forge a new resolutions that would build lasting partners among us. Our mission does not start and end in forming policies. The more important part is what we look forward to, which is how we act on the challenges that face us, the community, and how we implement measures that we think we should be done in spite of the dangerous COVID-19. Lastly, I encourage everyone to live out your purpose in sports and not reside on your preference, whether you are an athlete, a coach, a sports educator, a local government sports educator, or a stakeholders. Sports has always taught us to rise up to the challenges, dream, dream bigger than us, to reach for goals which border on the impossible. Together we can do so many things, achieve much for sports and for our country. But before I'll end, I would like to thank TJ Rusandich, our good friend, the president of the United States Sports Academy in Alabama, who've been very, very persistent of helping us. And TJ, thank you so much for your presence this morning. I would like to remember again your father, who first brought by President Marcos to set the University of Life here in Felsport. As chairman of the Philippine Sports Commission, it is my honor to welcome all the participants and speakers. Thank you for your relenting support of our sports program. Welcome to the National Sports Summit 221. Ito para sa bayan, para sa mga bata. Sa darating na panahon, they will become leaders. My presence as public servant at the commission is not for us. It's for the children, for the backbone, who are the future of this country. And hoping that they will imbue values, virtues that are necessary to build a strong country, a united Philippines. Good morning and thank you.
Maraming salamat po. Again, PSC Chairman William Ramirez. And I know all of us here are very grateful for your presence in today's opening ceremony. Now, to give her inspirational message to all of us here today, can we all welcome the Department of Education Secretary Leonor Magtolis Briones.
Special greetings this afternoon from the Department of Education to the participants of the National Sports Summit.
uh, composed of different sports stakeholders such as sports educators, athletes, coaches, LGU coordinators for sports, national sports associations, and other interested individuals who have joined this summit to consider the 38 resolutions which were held during the last summit in 1992 and assess how these resolutions were finalized. We in the Department of Education have always been supportive of sports activities. We know that there is a very close relation between mental capacities and physical capacities of our learners, and we place great importance on physical education and sports. We are committed to promote quality basic education, which includes a holistic approach by continuously developing and strengthening our policies, including, of course, physical education and sports policies. We also want to address the needs of talented students in different sports disciplines at the school level in terms of providing trained teachers, facilities, and equipment. One of the most important activities related to sports, which the DepEd holds on a regular basis, of course, is the Palarong Pambansa, which through the years has expanded its reach, increased the number of sports activities, and contributed to camaraderie, to sportsmanship, and to the participation of the entire country practically, especially the host local government units, and also the enthusiastic support of parents and friends of our athletes. For example, the Palarong Pambansa is in the position to encourage and support students to discover and to enrich their own potential to become athletes. Our schools provide opportunities for learners to figure out their potential at an early age, and so we in the department create avenues for them to flourish. Our Palarong Pambansa, which is an example of regular sports activities which the department conducts, is a year-round activity where students develop, train, and compete, and along the way prepare themselves to be healthier and better citizens and humans once they leave school and engage in the realities of work and professional development outside of the schools. We have 27 sporting events in Palarong Pambansa, which is participated in by student athletes from all over the country, where they showcase their skills, their talents, and passion for sports. In the process, they learn valuable lessons like sportsmanship, determination, grit, perseverance, and solidarity. One of the latest, if not the latest development in sports is of course the passage of Republic Act 11470, which President Duterte recently signed, and which creates the National Academy of Sports, which is an attached agency to the Department of Education. NAS is mandated to implement a quality and enhanced secondary education program integrated with a special curriculum on sports. The establishment of NAS, of which the Department of Education is the chair, aims to raise our student athletes' competitiveness in the field of sports and produce hope with great hopes world-class athletes in the near future. And so, as you converge once more in the National Sports Summit, we and the Department of Education are especially happy. We have a new member of the DepEd family, which is the NAS, and our relationship and spirit of cooperation with the National Sports Commission, headed by my very good friend, Chairman Butch Ramirez, is even strengthened more and more as we jointly engage in the management and the administration of this newest member of the DepEd family and also of the Philippine Sports Commission. We wish you a good summit. We wish you wonderful discoveries, perhaps in the assessment of the 38 resolutions which were earlier passed during the last National Sports Summit. And we hope that there will be more action. We hope that with your gathering and getting together, sports will even be strengthened, and we will finally reach our dream and our goal of producing more world-class athletes, not only for our own schools and municipalities and provinces or the country, but on a global scale as well. Good luck and have fun thinking, implementing, and enjoying sports. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, DepEd Secretary Leonor Magtolis-Briones. Moving forward, we are also privileged to be joined here today by another active partner in Philippine sports. You may recognize him for the timeless Filipino movies he has been a part of. But more than that, you will recognize him for the sincere passion he has shown for developing sports in the local and national level. Can we all welcome the 3rd District Representative of Manila and the Chairman of the House Committee on Youth and Sports, Representative John Martin Yul Servonieto, for his message.
Masigabong pagbati sa lahat ng bumubuo po at isang mapagpalang umaga po sa ating lahat. Sa mga tagapagtaguyod at lahat ng dumalo sa National Sports Summit ngayong taong 2021. Ako po ay lubos na nagagalak na kayo ay makadaupang palad sa pagkakataong ito sa Zoom bilang inyong kinatawan sa Kongreso sa larangan ng Youth and Sports. Higit sa lahat, nais ko pong magbigay pugay sa ating PSC Chairman Ramirez at ang lahat ng PSC Commissioners na sa kabila ng napakaraming suliranin na kinakaharap ng ating bansa, inyong minabuti na ituloy at balangkasin ang National Sports Summit na may temang Sports Conversations. Sa aking pananaw, sadyang napapanahon na tayong lahat nga ay magkaroon muli ng sports conversation. Batid natin lahat na ang buong mundo, kasamang Pilipinas, ay nakakaranas ng pandaigdigang pandemya na kumikitil ng napakaraming buhay at nagpapahirap sa ating ekonomiya. Lahat halos ng aspeto ng ating pamumuhay ay matinding naapektuhan nito. Hindi lingid sa ating kaalaman na marami sa ating mga gawain at kinagisnan mga pinagkakaabalahan ay ating munang pansamantalang isinasantabi upang harapin ang higit na mabibigat na suliranin dala ng pandemya. Una sa lahat, ating binibigyan pansin ang ating pansarili at pangkalahatang kalusugan. Ang ikalawa, marahil ay ang ating kabuhayan na sadyang naapektuhan sa halos lahat ng antas nito. Karamihan sa ating mga anak ay hindi pa rin pagsipasok sa kanilang mga paaralan. At bilang mga magulang, tayong lahat ay may agam-agam at pangamba kung ano ang magiging bukas na ating haharapin matapos ang pandemyang ito. Aking binanggit na napapanood ng paksa sa ating sports summit ngayon taon dahil sports ay isa sa ating pansamantalang isinasantabi bunsod sa maraming mabibigat na mga suliranin na ating inaharap sa kasalukuyan. In these trying times, sports appear to be one of the least of our priorities. I cannot blame ourselves for this, but this must not be so any longer. Alam po ng lahat na halos lahat ng sports event ay sinuspinde upang maiwasan ang pagkalat at pinsala ng coronavirus. Marami sa ating mga manlalaro ang nawalan ng gana na mag-training dahil maliban sa humina ang material na suporta sa kanila, walang nakatitiyak kung kailan sila maaaring makapaglarong muli. Higit na mahalaga, bumili ng pagkain kaysa magdaos ng isang sports event. Maging ang ating mga tinatawag na grassroots sports ay tila nahihinto natin sa kasalukuyan. Ladies and gentlemen, batid rin natin na nagsusumikap ang ating pamahalaan upang agad nating malampasan ang pagsubok na ito. Ang liwanag ay ating naaninag. Hindi maglalaon, paparating na ang bakuna na magbibigay proteksyon sa ating mga mamamayan. Sadyang napaka-critical ang mga panahong ito na malapit nang magkaroon ng katuparan ang ating magapi ang pandemyang ito. Alam nating lahat na walang unos na tumatagal panghabang buhay. No storm lasts forever. Makakaraos rin tayo sa unos na ating kinakarap ngayon. Ngunit sa gitna nito, hindi natin maaring talikuran tuluyan ang sports na siyang maaring maging daan at paraan upang magdulot ng panibagong pag-asa sa ating mga kababayan. Sa yuktong ito, nais kong ibaling ang ating mga mata sa bansang Japan na nagsusumikap na ituloy ang una ng naudlot na 2020 Olympics sa kabila ng mga agam-agam na marami ang hindi makakadalo at makikilahok. Higit sa lahat, maraming mga dating manunood ay nag-aatubiling magdesisyon kung manunood sa napakahalagang sports event na ito na ginaganap lamang tuwing ika-4 na taon. Sa kabilang banda, pinagsisikapan ng bansang Japan na ituloy ang pagkakaroon ng Olympics sa taon na ito upang maging daan at paraan upang bumangon sa pagkakadapa bunga ng pandemya. Para bang nais ng bansang Japan na ang Olympics ang maging hudyat upang ipaalam sa daigdig na patuloy pa rin ang buhay. Sa makatuwid, ang sports ang gagawing simbolo ng muling pagbangon mula sa pandemya na nagpabago sa ating mga pamumuhay nung nakalipas na taon. Ito rin ang saloobin ng inyong kinatawan sa Kongreso. Bakit di natin pag-usapan muli ang kalagayan ng sports sa Pilipinas? Bakit hindi natin pagyamanin ang mga pamamaraan na isinasagawa na ngayon ng ating mga ahensya? Sa ahensyang pangpalakasan tulad ng pagsasagawa ng bubble sports, bakit di natin gawin daan paraan ang pagbangon ng sports tulad ng pinagsusumikapan ng bansang Japan? Bakit di natin gamitin ang sports upang buhayin muli ang pag-asa sa puso ng ating mga kababayan patuloy na nagdurusa? Malaki ang ating pag-asa na makamit ang matagal nang minimiting gold medal sa Olympics sa kupunan ng ating patuloy na inihahanda. May mga atleta na nagbibigay sa atin pag-asa tulad nila EJ Obiena, Carlos Yulo, Yumir Marcial at Iris Magno. Ay ilan lamang sa ating mga hopefuls na maaaring mag-uwi ng gold medal sa bansa. Sadyang napapanahon na pag-usapan muli ang sports sa bansa. Sadyang napapanahon na tayo ay muling magkaroon ng sports conversation tulad ng tema ng pagpupulong na ito. Bilang inyong kinatawan sa Kongreso, patuloy pa rin na ang aming pagbabalangkas ng iba't ibang mga panukala na magsusulong ng sports sa bansa. Una po naming tinalakay ang implementasyon ng Republic Act number 10699, also known as National Athletes and Coaches Benefits and Incentive Act. Nais namin makatiyak na ang 20% discount para sa ating mga national athletes at coaches ay naipapatupad. This incentivizes our athletes for all their hard work in representing our country. This also shows our athletes that the government is in full support and gives importance to the prestige and honor of our athletes have brought to our country. Ang insentibong ito ay maaari ring isiping kritikal na tulong sa hirap na dinaranas ng marami sa ating mga atleta sa panahon ng pandemya. Pangalawa po, pinag-aaralan namin ang panukala na magbibigay ng 3,000 pesos worth of sports voucher para sa mga batang atleta, 50,000 pesos para sa mga local sports organizations to promote various sports program in the localities, and 500,000 pesos for the improvement of local sports facilities. Ito ang nilalaman ng isang panukala sa ilalim ng Young Athletes Assistance Act. Pangatlo, sinusulong din po namin ang pagkaroon ng summer youth camp sa bawat barangay na nakapaloob ang sport development program bilang isa sa programa. Kasama din po sa sport agenda ng inyong kongreso na talakayin kung napapanahon na ba na itaas ang cash incentives para sa ating mga atleta na mag-uuwi ng medalya mula sa international sports competitions. At kasama na rin ang kanilang mga coaches. Akin rin ikinalulugod na ipaalam sa inyo na ang ilan sa mga sports priority natin ay may counterpart measures sa Senado. Gaya ng panukalang Anti-Game Fixing Act, Philippine National Games, Young Athletes Assistance Act, at Summer Youth Camp. Bagamat maiksi pa lamang ang panahon ko sa committee, aking naunawaan ang malaking hamon na dapat nating bigyan ng tamang pansin ang sports sector. Higit sa iba pang mga nakalipas na mga panahon, ito ay maaari nating gawing daan at pamamaraan upang buhayin muli ang pag-alapin ang pag-asa sa puso ng ating mga kababayan. Let us use sports as the driving force to inspire our fellow Filipinos to dream again for that elusive Olympic gold medal that, for me, is now within our reach. It's time to have a sports conversations. Lagi pong nakabukas ang aming tanggapan upang kayo ay matulungan itaguyod ang ating sports and youth sector sa anumang pinakamabisang paraan. Again, congratulations to the PSC leadership and to all who have contributed to the success of this endeavor. Mabuhay po tayong lahat. Maraming pong salamat. Magandang hapon po. O magandang umaga po.
Maraming salamat po, Representative Nieto. Our next guest is often seen working at the side of our dear President. We are heartened that he has a direct hand on leading Philippine sports in the Senate and in the country. He played a very important role in the country's hosting of the 2019 Southeast Asian Games because he believed in what our athletes can do. Let us welcome the chairman of the Senate Committee on Youth and Sports, Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo, to give his inspirational message.
A good day to everyone. I would like to thank and congratulate the Philippine Sports Commission for organizing this important activity that highlights the value of sports in society. Sports has always been an underrated aspect of a nation building. It is more than just entertainment, a hobby, or a game. For me, as with all of us here, we understand that sports helps in developing the capacity of individuals and harnessing the energies of communities and nations. On a personal level, sports participation promotes good health and physical fitness. It encourages every Filipino to keep an active lifestyle. It also helps build morals and character. Sports also provides an outlet for the Filipino youth to veer away from destructive activities. On community level, sports enhances the appreciations for laws, rules, and regulations. It strengthens social ties, brings communities together, and promotes cohesiveness, tolerance, and inclusivity. It is also an effective way to reduce crime, drug use, and other illegal activities. On a national level, sports animates the collective spirit of the Filipino nation and drives it towards unity and bayanihan. Given the ongoing pandemic, I believe that sports could serve as a driver for all Filipinos to rise together as one nation in the same way that we have risen together in the past in support of our national athletes. As chair of the Senate Committee on Sports, rest assured that I will continue to support long-term sports development in the country through our hard work and unity. I am confident that more Filipino athletes will put the country on the world stage and that the sports will help us create a much better future for the entire nation. Again, I wish you all a productive summit. Mabuhay po kayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po, Senator Bongo, for that very inspirational message. You know, today's festivities will not be possible if not for his heart for Philippine sports and his unrelenting support for our national athletes and coaches. Since the start of his administration, we have witnessed historic developments in the country's sports scene, and we expect many more to come. To give his inspirational message, let us all welcome His Excellency, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
My warmest greetings to the Philippine Sports Commission as it spearheads the National Sports Summit 2021. This online sports lecture forum is indeed timely as we turn to sports as a means to move forward and engender national unity, especially as we deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Conducting this initiative through an online platform proves that sports can still be a tool in promoting excellence and instilling pride in the hearts of our people even as we prepare for the new normal. I urge all the participants to continue your worthwhile endeavors so that we may further empower our Filipinos, especially the youth, as you have a successful event. May you have a successful event.
Maraming salamat po, President Duterte, for the inspirational message. And to all our esteemed guests for this virtual opening ceremony. Again, if we could give a round of applause to everyone. And thank you also for watching. For those watching with us live on our social media accounts for this opening ceremonies, maraming salamat po. As we conclude the opening ceremonies today, may I request our guests to turn on their cameras for the photo opportunity together with all of our participants. May I request our guests to be spotlighted on the Zoom, also to our commissioners as well as we move forward. Again, this photo opportunity will be this will take a while po, no, since we are quite in a big group uh, as of late. So please bear with us on this. We are spotlighting our guests and VIPs for our photo opportunity. Please give us your patience. As well as to those participants, you can also turn your videos on for this picture taking ceremony. As we spotlight our guests and officials for this morning, for those participants who also wish to use our NSS virtual background photo, it is also located in the chat box as we speak. So you may apply that on your Zoom virtual background as well. All right. I think we are already spotlighting our guests. Okay. If you're ready, kindly give us your big smile, everyone, for our participants. All right. I think our tech support team is almost done spotlighting. I think we're good to go for our first photo opportunity. All right.
Okay na po from Tech.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you to all our participants. I can see your smiles, though it's really a big number of group for all of us here present in the opening ceremonies. And thank you also again to our PSC Chairman, William Butch Ramirez, and to our commissioners who are also present, and the VIPs for the opening ceremonies. Now, before we move forward to the first session of sports conversations, we will be taking a short break. And while we do this, may I go through a few reminders to help us go through the session swiftly. We'll be showing now our house rules for this morning. To ensure the ease of program flow, number one, the session will be held through the Zoom video conferencing application.
Uh, Please be at the meeting room at least 30 minutes before the program. Please do not share the sign in link sent to you. Only registered names will be allowed in today. And again, as I've said earlier, please use the naming convention for today's event, your affiliation slash first name and last name. Next, each session lasts for around 2 hours. Therefore, a participant should have attended at least 70 minutes, which will be checked by the attendance committee. A certificate will be given for those who would be able to attend all 4 sessions. Number 3, all are requested to be muted during the lecture. A facilitator will be present to read through questions from the participants during the open forum. It is important that later you may send in your questions for the discussion during the 10-minute break. You may send it to any of facilitator 1, 2, or 3 on the chat box section. Sorry. Then last, we request all participants to fill up the evaluation and attendance forms at the end of each session, as these are required for completion of participation. Thank you very much. And I think as we were flashing this also earlier in our before we start the program, I think also this was also emailed to you, our participants, prior to our event. So I hope we really hope that everybody follows this as we go along our program. So, and now, welcome to the second part of our program, the lecture proper. Today's session is one of the many lectures we will be having for the first phase of the NSS. As said earlier, the sports conversations would be presided over by recognized figures from the local to the international sports scene to deliver short lectures in the online conference format. Afterwards, an open forum will be facilitated to gather insights and views and as a synthesis to every session. And to help us on that matter, we ask the help of one of the PSC's hardworking consultants. He's with us today, and he's a former dean, College of Sports, Physical Education and Recreation at the Mindanao State University Marawi campus. He also studied the Master of Science, Leadership and Management in Sports and Sports Psychology at the University of Oregon in the United States. He is currently the Dean of the Philippine Sports Institute. He is an author, an athlete, coach, a sports missionary, and an international speaker. Help me in welcoming our moderator for this lecture, Professor Henry Daut.
Thank you very much, Joas, for that very generous introduction. His Excellency, President of the Republic of the Philippines, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, the ever hardworking Honorable Senator Christopher Lawrence Go, our Honorable John Marvin Servo, Secretary Leonor Briones, Chairman William Boots Ramirez, and the PSC Commissioners, my fellow sports advocates and practitioners, Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace from Mindanao and from the Philippines. It is an honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you our very distinguished guest and resource speaker in today's launching of PSC's National Sports Summit. And no better way of taking off by having one of the most sought after sports leader in the world in the person of the President and CEO of America's Sports University, the United States Sports Academy, in the person of Dr. Tom J. Rosenditz. He is the son of the founding father of the USSA, Dr. Thomas Rosenditz, who once served as consultant to the Philippine government in the early 70s. Dr. TJ, as he is fondly called, is back to renew ties with the Philippines and continue the legacy of his father by sharing with us his vast knowledge and expertise in sports. Dr. TJ, as he is fondly called, obtained his master's and doctorate degrees in sports management from the USSA and served the Academy for more than 33 years as faculty and officer of the institution, receiving the Alumnus of the Year Award in 1994 and the Distinguished Service Award in 2015 for his significant contribution in the success of the Academy's international projects that he led. Dr. Rosenditz is a well-traveled man, crisscrossing the globe, bringing USSA and its programs, helping sports development in various countries as consultant or resource speaker in the areas of sports development, sports facilities, sports marketing, sports management, among others. His travels brought him to Middle East, China, South Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, among others, establishing partnerships between USSA and those countries. And hopefully, the Philippines will soon be part of the list of partners to benefit from the programs of the Academy in Sports and Physical Education. A veteran, having served his country as member of the 101st Airborne Paratrooper, he also served in various capacities in numerous commissions, federations, and sports associations, both in the US and international, and that he promotes sports and related fields in his specializations. I will be taking much of the time if I enumerate all the accomplishments of our resource speaker. Today, we are greatly honored by his presence as he shares with us the secrets of success from a first world perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome a sportsman, a sports leader, sports missionary, and a friend of Philippine sports, Dr. T.J. Rosenditz. Dr. TJ? Hello?
There we go.
Welcome. Nice to see you back.
Hey, Henry, it's good to see you too. And Butch, it's a real pleasure to be here. And let me send all of you greetings from the other side of the planet.
Yes.
Where it's 8 o'clock at night almost, or it is.
Sorry for that.
But anyway, I'm very pleased and honored to be invited to participate in this program. I know that we were going to try and do this last February, but you know, we were interrupted by the COVID. And so my congratulations to all of you being able to organize this event virtually. And I certainly hope that I'll be able to live up to that introduction. It's going to be hard to do, but I'll give it a shot. So.
TJ, you are on mute.
I keep on hitting unmute. I'm saying unmute here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Did you miss my whole speech just now? Anyway, well, let me just briefly recap what I was saying. Again, greetings from the other side of the planet. It's 8 o'clock at night here in Alabama. But I'm honored and pleased to be invited to participate in the program. I know that we tried to do this last February, but we were interrupted. And so my congratulations to all of my good friends at the PSC for being able to pull this together. So let me just launch straight into
Dr. TJ, I think you're again
You
on mute.
unmuted your microphone.
mute. Okay. I keep getting a screen that says the host won't let me unmute, but anyway, let's try again. Anyway, briefly about the Academy. It's the only freestanding accredited sport university in the U.S. We've been around since 1972, and we've done programs all over the world in about 65 countries. And I ought to note that Professor Dout was a beneficiary of that in the early 80s. And I was one of the faculty that taught in that program in the mid 80s on what, ironically enough, is the current campus of the Philippine Sport Institute. And we're looking forward to the day that we will be able to continue to teach on the campus there. So next slide. Okay, sports from a first world perspective. Generally, when you think about the first world, you're considering Europe, North America, Japan, and the ANZAC countries. But I need to note that there is a considerable difference between them. How sports are governed, funded, and conducted, all the way down to individual events. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to draw on the United States, obviously, because it is the example with which I am the most familiar. Let me get the next slide. Okay. Arguably, the United States has been the most successful country in the world insofar as sports is concerned. It has had the most number of medals in international competition, for example, the Olympics. Since the founding of the Olympics in 1896, the United States has won more than 2,800 medals, and the closest one to it is Russia. And bearing in mind that there were 5 Olympiads before the Bolshevik Revolution, that included the imperial athletes during the Tsarist times, way back around the turn of the 19th century. But the other aspect to that is that the economic activity associated with sports in around the world is about $489 billion. And the US share of that actually is about 1/3 or 165 billion. And you got to bear in mind that that is only for events where people got to buy a ticket to go in and see it. If you add to it all of the recreational activities, fishing, jogging, exercise, fun games, youth sports, that number would go to over $300 billion. Pre-COVID, the economic activity in the United States employs more than 7 million people, but there's a real hit on both economic activity and employment in the sports sector in this country because of COVID. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little later in this presentation. But to get an idea on how the United States arrived at this place, you really need to understand that sports is building a sport program is a generational proposition. There's nothing that I could do today that would provide me the results, in a very short period of time. So the fact of the matter is that we need to look at how the sports industry in the United States actually developed. While sports has always been a part of American cultural life, the sport industry as we know it, can be traced to the mid 1980s. And I think that you'll see parallels about what I'm going to talk about here and what is transpiring within the Philippines. But in order for a sport industry to grow and thrive, there has to be 3 fundamental things that need to occur. Number one is urbanization. There has to be people coming from the countryside where they were primarily farmers, subsistence farmers, an agrarian background, and began to work in commercial enterprises, factory industry, and what have you. Once that occurred, you had a pool of people that were earning wages and they had a disposable income. And you need to have a disposable income in order to buy tickets to go in and watch the event. And the other thing that you really need to have is free time. Basically, uh, in the early ages or time of the Industrial Revolution, work was 7 days a week, 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours a day. But over time and with labor movements, that eventually shrunk to where it is now 5 days a week, a typical 40-hour work week. And that gives people the free time weekends to participate in sports or to go out and buy tickets to go and look at events and what have you. The connection between the Industrial Revolution that fully got underway and the growth of sports is really what had happened here. Uh, you really need to understand that all of those things need to come together. And I think really when you look around the Philippines from the many times that I've been there, that is what is occurring today. Can I get the next slide? There is real differences between how sports grew in the American experience and the development of sport in Europe. Sports in Europe tend to be more connected to the government. And we'll see this when we talk a little bit about the role of what we call central sport organizations, CSOs, and the international sports structure. However, sports in the United States tends to be more connected to the school system. Basically, the feeder system for sport, as I will show you shortly, is run through the schools, and that has a real impact in the overall success of the national sport effort in this country. But the three things that are common to both of them is as sport grew in both places, there were also three different things. And number one was a class distinction that people who were well off tend to participate more in sports. They had more leisure time and they had more resources to do that. And I'm going to tie back to that towards the end of this lecture because that is something that's beginning to happen in the United States, one more time. The next item on that that I ought to note is that it was really built around the idea of amateurism. The whole Olympic movement from the 1896 games all the way up until roughly the Dream Team in the Barcelona games with professional basketball was really about amateur sport. The last vestige of amateur sport really in this country is intercollegiate sport um, in the high performance realm. But even that is being eliminated through recent developments in what we call name, image, and likeness rules that'll take effect next year. And I'll discuss the impact of that as well a little bit later in the conversation. The other one was that women were often excluded. In fact, the first Olympic Games had no women at all in the competition. So, anyway, those were some of the things that underpinned the development of sport in the Western world. Can I have the next slide, please? Let's talk a little bit about the role of the schools in sports. Basically, 1850s, actually in 1854, the first compulsory education rules were enacted in the United States. And state after state eventually adopted the same thing. But because of this, the time that children had available was then segmented. Before 1850, there really, most of the kids didn't go to school. They just sort of ran free. and only the moneyed and leisure people sent their kids to school. But once everyone went to school, you had, school in the morning and into the afternoon. Then you had free time, but the kids were congregated together until the parents came home from work. And people understood we had to do something with this. So they began to establish playgrounds and organize after school activities. And that was really sort of the beginning of the rise of sport in the school system. Like anything, organization was required. And so sports leagues, sport organizations began to be established in the cities right around the turn of the century. The first one being in New York, and it spread rapidly to the other large urban areas, and the rural areas followed soon behind. In the 1960s, the idea of sports being a part of school life was thoroughly embedded into the uh, life and activity of education. So the main point on that is that the continue to grow uninterrupted, except during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The economy collapsed. There wasn't any money, but other organizations stepped in, and this was the first times we saw private leagues, Little League Baseball, Pop Warner, and what have you, private initiatives, to go ahead and provide for sport. Can I have the next slide, please? Intercollegiate sports really began to get formed in the 1840s, and the first sport clubs were organized in what we call the Ivy League, and the competition between schools began in the 1850s. The first events were actually rowing, where Yale would compete against Harvard in rowing events. But all of these competitions were largely organized by the students. In the 1850s, baseball was added. In the 1870s, football was introduced with other sports at different times, such as track and field, athletics, it is, and basketball. And what wound up happening was there arose a need for regulatory oversight. In 1906, the very first organization to regulate collegiate sports, the precursor of the NCAA, was founded. And that was caused by President Theodore Roosevelt in response to the injuries that were occurring in football. There were severe injuries, even deaths among students from the way that the game was played. And Roosevelt said, you either clean it up or I'm going to end it. But from there, other aspects of regulation have embedded themselves in the overall sports structure, not only for the regulation directly of the sports, but from collateral issues, for example, such as the US ADA, which deals with anti-doping. To be very honest, any place where the stakes are so high as they are in sports, whether it's for medals or for money, there's a real temptation for people to cheat. And among the ways that people cheat, as you know, is through doping. And so there's a real impetus to stamp out doping, not only within the United States, but around the world. Let me have the next slide, please. High performance sports, which encompasses not only intercollegiate, but also professional sports, also started in the 1830s and 40s, primarily with baseball, although there were other events. And the National Baseball League was formed in 1876, and the American League in 1901, and the two of them merged, about a decade or so later. But I ought to note And there I also have on the slide, you can just read it yourself, professional football, which is now the NFL, that encompasses two conferences. But one of the reasons that regulation had to be imposed on professional sports can be traced back to the 1919 Black Sox cheating scandal, where professional gamblers influenced the World Series. Like 9 members of the Black Sox team were indicted for accepting gambling money. And out of that, the first commissioner for baseball was appointed, and Kennesaw Landis. But the point that I would also like to make is gambling is a continuing issue in sports, and particularly in high performance sports, not only in the professional leagues, but in events like the World Cup. I'm sure that most of you remember the game fixing scandal that occurred in the South Africa World Cup back in 2010 that were actually originated out of Singapore. But I would like to note that when we talk about sports, there are two activities that will draw severe penalties as it relates to sports. And the first of these is doping. If we, all of sports spends a lot of resources trying to stamp out doping, and we all know what has happened now with Russia, for example, and the penalties where they're not going to be able to show their flag in the Olympics in July should they games actually come off. And the other one is gambling. If you are found to be gambling on sports and you're an athlete, you're almost certain to be banned from participation. And the reasons for that is very simple. That if spectators, the people that buy the tickets and participate as spectators, if they think that there's no legitimacy in the sport, then sport itself will die. And that is why that is so important. Can I have the next slide, please? Briefly, let's talk about international amateur high performance sport. Basically, attempts were made to revive the Olympics before Baron Pierre de Coubertin founded the Olympic movement in 1894 with the first summer games taking place in Athens in 1896. There was an effort in Sweden and, of course, between in England as well. But real governance began with the introduction of rules, and that largely occurred in the London Olympics of 1908. There had already been, for example, an international federation for rowing that predated the Olympic movement, actually. But in the 1908 games, you had rules for participation, uh, eligibility to come to the games, and organizations, the international federations like FINA for swimming and the IAAF, now World Athletics, were founded right around the time of the 1908 Olympics. All of these, or the large proportion of the international federations, are based in Lausanne, where the headquarters of the International Olympic Committee is. And a lot of these have deep roots in Europe. A lot of the international federations, I deem them to be Eurocentric, but all of the countries in Europe have a CSO, kind of like the Philippine Sport Commission. You have departments or ministries of sports. In fact, the United States is really the only country in the world that does not have a central sport organization run by the government. But here too, that is also changing even within the last couple of months here in the United States. Let me turn to the current structure of sport in America. Could I have the next slide, please? What I have just described for you as we walk through history, talking about how the sport industry was founded and grew. And the point here is that it's evolutionary. It wasn't somebody had a grand plan and here it is. But generally, the performance pyramid is divided into tiers. It's a hierarchy. And so the key here is the broader the base along the bottom. In this case, pre-K through middle school, and the ages are shown there. And you begin to draw people up through the pyramid, the more high performance and better performing athletes you are going to have at the top of the pyramid. Looking globally in the United States before COVID, uh, the numbers that I have here are from 2018. A lot of the numbers are from an academic year that straddles 2019 to 2020 are disrupted. We don't have solid numbers yet. But generally speaking, you're talking about 8.2 million, well, actually 36 million kids playing organized competitive sports between the ages of 6 and 18 within the United States. There's about 8.2 million that are participating in the lower grades through middle school. There is about 8 million kids participating in interscholastic sport, school against school, at the secondary school level, what we call high school. 675,000 athletes participating at the intercollegiate level, which is university against university in scholastic competition. And then, of course, high performance spans everything from the amateur sports run by the sport federations to professional sports. But what is the implications or the application of this in the real world? So let's take one sport, athletics, which is the reason that I had selected that one, is because athletics are played just about everywhere. I know that the Philippines has a strong athletics team, and I'm hoping that your pole vaulter is going to have a chance to play in the compete in the summer games coming up. But anyway, at the very top of the pyramid, USA Track and Field, which is the governing body for amateur athletics within the United States, has a budget in 2018 of $37 million. So that budget supported 127 athletes that went to the Rio Olympic Games. But as I was pulling this presentation together, I talked with Dr. Dave Schrock. Dave Schrock is chair of the USA Track and Field Association Committee and plays a major role in the oversight and administration of track and field in the United States. He told me that there are approximately 250 active athletes divided into two groups. Tier one athletes are the ones that are eligible to be on US teams, to go to the Olympics, to compete in the World Championships or the Diamond League or what have you. The other 100 or so athletes are tier two. They're very, very good, and they are being developed to replace those that age out, become injured, or what have you on the main US team within the United States. But let's go down one level to the collegiate level. In 2018, colleges and universities spent $875 million just on track and field competition, not on football or basketball, but only on track and field. In that group of athletes, there were 73,000 students that were active participants in intercollegiate sport competition, of which roughly 25,000 were on scholarships. They were good enough to have their tuition paid for by the university. So I would suggest to you that, among the 25,000 students there that are participating, a lot of those could actually be competing for USA track and field at the highest level, but for whatever reason, they are currently not. So let's step down to the next level in the performance pyramid, and that is in the secondary schools. Now, according to the numbers that you get from the National Federation of High Schools, that is the group that regulates uh, or is the umbrella group to which all of the interscholastic sport organizations belong. For example, in Alabama, it's the Alabama High School Athletic Association. They belong to the NFHS. Well, according to NFHS numbers, the average spending on sports for each student athlete participating in sports comes to about $617. There was participation in track and field in 2018. At the high school level, there were 1.58 million students actively competing in interscholastic competition, school against school. So there's the base, really, of your pyramid. So if you stop and think about 1.5 million students that would be drawn up to become one of the 73,000 students at the collegiate level, who are then drawn up to become one of the 250 students, you can see how this structure based within the schools really goes to support sport excellence, say within the United States. It is one of the reasons why the United States, you would think that, wow, they got a budget of $37 million. But if you look closely, the reality is the actual spending for track and field in the United States was closer to $2 billion. So you're able to marshal the resources by leveraging a universal institution, that of the education system, to provide a pathway from the grassroots to the high performance sports, in this particular instance, in athletics. That, by the way, is replicated in basketball, in soccer, and across the board. So, anyway, if there's a message here, I think that the Philippines would be well served to work very closely with the Department of Education to develop vigorous interscholastic sport programs within the nation's school system. Governance. Um, Basically, uh, what I had mentioned is that during this time that sport became organized in the United States, if you listen very closely to what I was saying, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NCAA, the NFHS, all of those are private entities. None of them are directly affiliated with the government. It was private initiative. At the collegiate level, it was students who organized the sports themselves. And the government directed change, but they didn't do it. They left it to the universities to sort it out when things got out of hand. So, as I had said earlier, the United States now is the only real significant country uh, among the developed world that doesn't have a CSO. And that, too, by the way, is also beginning to change. Basically, the U.S. Olympic Committee has been the closest thing that we've had to a central sport organization, but that is also private. Up until 2 months ago, uh, the federal government did not directly provide funding or anything else. They enacted a law that enabled the Olympic Committee to recognize the national governing bodies like USA Track and Field, and they were the ones that were authorized to deal with the International Olympic Committee. But beyond that, it was more or less hands off. However, in December, Congress passed a law and the president signed it called the Empowering Olympic, Paralympic, and Amateur Athletics Act. And basically, the government has interjected itself into the way that the U.S. OPC, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, conducts its business. Basically, the government can now step in and dissolve the board of directors. They can mandate funding be spent on things like US safe sport. And this came about very simply because of, one more time, left to its own devices, the public sector or the private sector failed. Everyone is probably well aware of the sexual abuse scandals surrounding USA Gymnastics. The US Olympic Committee became aware of it and they failed to act. And with a result of the public outrage, the government came along and stepped in and says, we're going to go ahead and take a role in this. By the way, they did the same thing with doping. They passed the Rodachenko Doping Act, which has put the United States on a collision course with the IOC and WADA. But we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on as well. Can I have the next slide, please? Different levels of the pyramid have their own governance structures, and I had mentioned all of those. At the very top, professional and the governing bodies, the NGBs, are high performance. They're all independent. The specialized sport associations, for example, the National Senior Games or the International Sport University Federation, they're all independently run as well. Associated groups such as USADA, that's an independent group in the college level. The NCAA, NAIA, the National Junior College Athletic Association, the National Christian College Athletic Association. They all operate independently. They get together in certain forums, but again, it's done without intervention. And lastly is the NFHS for high school sport, which has 50 state affiliates. Each state has their own rules, which makes for a real mess sometimes, but that's the one that we're stuck with. So anyway, can I have the next slide? Let's talk about some of the issues in sport, and I'll begin really with gender. While the government has generally taken a hands-off approach to running sports in the country, they have been able to influence enormous power over the way that sports are run. For example, issues of public policy compelled the higher education community, especially colleges and universities, to provide more resources for women. Historically, women were treated as second-class citizens in terms of sports. They didn't have much in terms of support, facilities, coaching, and what have you. The real change came about in legislation called Title IX, and that was enacted in 1972. Before Title IX, only about 4% of women competed in organized sport in the collegiate level and higher, a little bit more at the lower levels. By 2016, that had completely changed. The number of women in participating in sports had grown by 990%. A huge proportion of women participating in sports, roughly 40% of the overall population, now compete in organized competition. Can I have the next slide, please? The result of this impetus, the federal government said, here's what, if you don't deal with giving opportunities to women, we're going to yank your money. That means no more money for grants to do research, no more money for financial aid, to pay tuition to go to your school, and these kinds of things. But the results of this not only dramatically increased the number of women participating in sports, but the outcome in high performance sport is very clear to see. The United States had the largest overall team in the 2016 Rio Olympic Games with 554 participants, and the women outnumbered the men. And that's also the same thing that had happened after the London Games. There were more women than men. The USA won the most medals in the games. And if you look at that, women won 61 of the medals and the men won 55. In gold medals, the women won 27 of the 46 golds. So, in other words, they won more than half of the gold medals that were earned in the games. And the same thing took place in London. And you can see the numbers that are there on the screen. And the point that I would like to make to you, if you are responsible for developing a sports strategy to try and get the most number of medals for the nation, I would suggest to you that you may want to put more emphasis on women's sports because the pathway to the podium is a little bit easier than it is for the men. I watched the introduction to the program highlighting the success of the Filipino basketball team in various competitions. But I think that you're going to have a tough time getting a gold medal against the NBA pros that are going to be populating the U.S. team should the games come off in 2021. But let me tell you that, all of this can change. Let's go back a slide for a moment. If you look at the bottom down here, uh, there's a problem that is brewing. Just this past week, the new president of the United States uh, basically decreed that non binary identifiers, in other words, transgender athletes, are allowed to participate unimpeded in women's sports. And they have access to the same facilities, which means locker rooms, bathrooms, and all the rest. Very simply, I will tell you that that will basically destroy women's sports in this country. Most assuredly, there are not going to be a lot of parents that are going to let their daughters go and compete at high school if there's boys in the locker room while they're changing. That ain't going to happen. I know I've got two daughters that played sports. I'd yank them out in a heartbeat. Okay. By the same token, the issue there is going to be what happens downstream. The IOC still hasn't ruled on what's going to happen with that. But here's fundamentally how it's unfair. And that is that right now, the in Connecticut, the state of Connecticut, two boys who said that, well, I think I'm a girl, but they were biological males, won most of the lower distance races in the state championships competing against girls. The girls in Connecticut sued the state saying that this is unfair, and that is now going through the court system. In the state of Montana, seeing what is going on with this, the state legislature there or is working on a law that says that you can only compete in the sport in the gender with which you were born. What you think later on really doesn't matter. But there's already been litigation promised about that. The real problem is that now you're going to have states that have competing rules, and it'll eventually have to go to the Supreme Court. But that will take years. But in the intervening time, you can bet that the number of girls and women participating in sport is going to decline dramatically. And so here in our country, we're beginning to undo a very successful strategy for sports success that we have been employing for years. Um, Let me just say one other thing. There's a woman in the United States, Allison Felix, who's won more gold medals in international track and field competition than even Usain Bolt, the famous Jamaican sprinter. Her best time in the 400 meters is 49.62 seconds. And this is at the very top of the pyramid. Right now within the United States, there are more than 300 boys at the high school level that can run faster than her. And that just simply underscores how unfair the rules that are being promulgated are. Now we can go on to the next slide. Emphasis on youth participation. Very simply, again, as a matter of public policy, this is very important for those of you in the driver's seat to recognize the need to do everything that you can to build grassroots programs, because unless you have that broad base of the performance pyramid, you're not going to have the best possible result at the top. Basically, the metadata that was compiled by the International Labor Organization, I mentioned this the last time I presented in the Philippines, but Senator Go more than ably articulated why sports is so important because of the skills that only sport can give to youth to make them positive contributors to society. So that is, when we talk about public policy, that's got to be one of the reasons why you do that. But there's a more fundamental reason, and that's because of the way that it accrues to the benefit of the youth themselves. There's a solid body of research in both Europe and in the United States that has empirically shown that student athletes, students who participate in sports, actually enter the workforce at a higher level in the organizational hierarchy in the enterprise. And because of the values that they internalize through participation in sport, things like teamwork, how to play by the rules, self-discipline, self-sacrifice, these individuals have a better career trajectory through their entire professional life. So in other words, the evidence is abundantly clear that sports prepares youth for their life, for whatever they are going to do post-competitive. Next slide, please. But anyway, what is the trends in sport participation? Basically, here too, the United States is busy working at undermining a very successful strategy that we have had for literally decades. COVID has had a terrible impact on sport participation in the United States. Surveys are indicating right now that almost 2/3 of parents, 66%, say that they're afraid to let their kids participate in sports because they will be exposed to COVID. The other part to that is naturally, through all kinds of social distractions and things like esports, youth interest in sports is declining. 30% this year said they are not interested in participating in sport, and that's compared to 20% last year. And so that's an alarming trend that is going to undermine the performance pyramid as I have explained it to you. But the real issue there is the background when I was talking about pay for play. I mentioned that in the 1930s, in the Great Depression, private initiatives stepped in to replace organized city leagues and things of that nature. Well, what has happened here, if you look at the numbers that I have on the screen, for poorer families, those that make $25,000 or less, there's been an overall 12% drop in participation. And that number is made far worse by COVID. When the schools shut down, the only place where these kids could participate in sports was in the organized sports that was being done through the schools. No school, no sports. So those numbers are going to get dramatically worse. Unfortunately, one of the sidebars in our society because historically sports has provided a avenue, for advancement. An awful lot of kids that come from families that are making that kind of money have no chance to go on to college or university, but they may go on if they can get a sports scholarship of some sort. The flip side of that, comparatively well off families, those making $100,000 or more a year, has seen an increase in sport participation. And the numbers there have been consistently high. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier in my presentation, that one of the prerequisites, the earliest participants in sports were the moneyed and leisured classes, those individuals that had the resources to pursue them. So anyway, the upshot on that is that the ones in the middle class, those numbers, thankfully, have remained fairly stable. As a sidebar, I would just simply like to emphasize one point. For economically deprived individuals, kids, they would have a far better chance of funding college and university if their parents availed themselves of tax deferred tuition programs than counting on getting the sports scholarship. But that's a tale for another day. Anyway, other areas where COVID has had a real impact that's undermining the performance pyramid as I described it is at the intercollegiate level. There's been a huge decline due to COVID. In 2020, more than 300 collegiate sport programs had been cut or suspended because of COVID. More than 100 intercollegiate sport programs were simply canceled. Among them, really shocking, for example, is Stanford University canceled volleyball. Volleyball in the United States, the hotbed, the place where the most volleyball players can be found at the best caliber, is Southern California. So for Stanford, which is located in Southern California and has a number of national championship titles, to cancel volleyball is nothing short of shocking for somebody such as myself. Overall sport revenue has declined across the board as well. The NCAA as an organization saw its revenue decline by 50% in 2020 over what they had in 2019. The March Madness basketball tournament that saw a cut in revenue that goes to the NCAA by over $600 million that they did not get from the television rights holders. Well, the NCAA takes the money that they get and they pass it out to the membership, primarily the Division I schools. Well, all of those schools took a reduction in revenue from the NCAA last year by about $365 million. In 2019, University of Texas, one of the members of my board of directors is the senior associate athletic director there, and we talked about this. Basically, in 2019, the university made $223 million in revenue just from sports, from running the sports programs, from television rights, ticket sales, buying hot dogs at the game, and what you name it. However, in 2020, as a result of the economic decline, they cut their budget by $13 million directly by eliminating about 150 jobs and cut back on recruiting travel, planes for teams. Now they go by bus and so on. But their overall decline is probably going to be on the order of about $50 million. And that's very, very hard to make up. Unfortunately, for the Olympic movement in the United States, the people that are taking the real hit on this are what we call the Olympic sports: gymnastics, wrestling, swimming, diving, athletics that we talked about, played at the intercollegiate level. those are the sports that are getting cut. They're not going to cut football, say at the University of Alabama, that in 2019 generated over $100 million in revenue for the university. So you can see where this is going to have a long-term impact on sport. High performance, the same thing. The professional leagues have literally lost billions of dollars in revenue and thousands of jobs over the course of the last year. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of numbers, but you can take that to the bank. And the international sports calendar, a lot of you involved in international sport with the PSC and what have you have seen cancellations, among them the Olympic Games being pushed off to this coming July, and billions of dollars. The IOC has had to dish out billions of dollars to keep the Olympic movement afloat. The US OPC has dished out millions of dollars to the NGBs to keep them afloat. And if the games don't come off in July, the revenue that they would actually earn from television basically is going to go by the boards, and that'll be a financial disaster, the likes of which has never really been seen in the modern era. Next one. So, anyway, change. What is the new normal going to look like? Basically, changes in the combination of sports that are conducted by individuals and organizations. We talked about the reluctance to participate in sports by parents. So, what is happening? A lot of the emphasis, instead of playing football, now people are playing golf. I can socially distance when I'm swinging. In my case, I socially distance as I chase my ball through the woods. But the other folks, if you got to get up and close to the other athletes, there's not a lot of interest there. Esports. Well, I can play that on my couch. I don't have to go outside. And the other sports that are being entered into the program, I never thought I would see breakdancing, but it's going to be in the Paris Games in 2024, and BMW biking and what have you. That's organizations being responsive to try and keep the youth engaged in their feeder system. The next number, spectators and participation. Right now, the real impediment for the Olympic Games in Tokyo is going to be getting foreign spectators into the stands. The bottom line on all of that is 80% of the people in Tokyo do not want to have. I got to turn my computer, my battery's running low. I don't want to lose you. But anyway, basically, 80% of the people in Japan don't want foreigners to come and watch the games. As far as that goes, they don't want the athletes. But how are you going to deal with crowded stadiums? People do not want to get close to each other. Sanitation. Right now I've seen devices that do, for example, UV, but you can't do that when there's people present. Now, people are creative. I recently saw a way to deal with COVID, in spectator spaces by using intense light. The photons disable the COVID virus. Doesn't kill it, but it eliminates its ability to connect to the human cells. And the other thing is testing. Maybe there'll be a way to test spectators as they arrive. Before you turn in your ticket, they do a swab or something. But I tell you, that's going to drive spectators away. Why would I want to go to a stadium to have something run up my nose when I could sit on my couch at home and watch it there? And there goes all of the funding for tickets, hot dogs in the stands, programs, and what have you. 3, changes in the way that revenue generation is going to be. I just mentioned that. But there's other things coming. Donations are down. Tokyo is having problems rounding up sponsorships to help fund the games because the sponsors are saying, hey, wait a minute, why am I paying millions of dollars when there's not going to be anybody sitting in the stands? And obviously, if the games don't come off, there's no television revenue. The bottom line that I'm going to leave with you on all of this, when COVID first struck back in 2019, I remember writing my president's column in our Academy newsletter saying that the COVID 19 is likely to be a black swan event. If you don't know what a black swan event, it's an occurrence that fundamentally changes the enterprise, society, the organization, what have you, uh, within which it is involved. And there's no question that COVID has turned out to be a black swan event, and it is fundamentally changing sports in ways that we cannot even fully explain as I sit here this evening in my overlit office here in Daphne, Alabama. But anyway, my home office here in my house. All I want to say is that that concludes my presentation tonight. You're lucky I could go on forever, but I'll spare you that. And I guess that there'll be a moderator coming on shortly to pose questions to me. And so with that, let me turn it back to you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. TJ Rosenditz, for that gold mine of information and best practices that Philippine sports can actually implement for its sports development. And I know the Department of Education, Secretary Briones is now itching to start working with PSC in terms of promoting sports in the elementary and secondary schools. And we look forward that as we continue this sports summit and sports conversation, we will learn more of the things that we need to have in order to chart a better and brighter future for Philippine sports. So thank you very much. And I know you're a very busy man, and even during this pandemic, you're still going around the world through virtual. And I cannot imagine how you spend your time going to Africa, to the Middle East, and Asia, among others. And we're very lucky and we're very grateful that you have spared a time to give Philippine sports a what's this? Some kind of an injection to pump up our Philippine sports. So thank you very much. And now
Thank
I
you.
would like to turn over to our facilitator, Joas, for some information before we go to the question and answer, where our participants are already scribbling the questions they want to learn more. So, Joas?
All right. Thank you very much again, Dr. TJ Rosenditch. Also to our moderator. I saw Chairman a moment ago just clapping. I hope everyone else is being informed on that. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Rosenditch. And now, for a moment, we will take this time to fill out our evaluation and attendance form for this session. Yeah, it is very important for all of our participants to fill this out, as this will be the basis of your presence for today, as well as for the session certificate. Again, as said earlier, a certificate will be given for each session, and an additional completion certificate will be given for those who would be able to attend all 4 sessions. I believe you can find the forms now in our chat box. So please make sure that both forms are submitted before or by the end of our session. I think I'm already informed by our tech support that our attendance form and evaluation form is are already on our chat box. So please, everyone, our participants, may I request to please check your chat box right now and fill out the evaluation and attendance form for this session.
Me too.
Also, as we prepare, as you all fill out the attendance form and evaluation forms, uh, after this, we'll be taking a 10-minute break. After we all fill out the evaluation and attendance forms, we will be having a 10-minute break. So please take this time for a water break, a bio break, etc. And for those of you at any time, at any moment from the 10-minute break later, you can now send your questions for the open forum. I think as our moderator told earlier, we are already scribbling to ask questions, and later we'll be able to do that on our 10-minute break. You will be able to send that to any of our facilitator 1, 2, or 3 on the chat box section also. And later we will be, I think, our moderator will be calling names. We'll be calling participants to personally ask our speaker, Dr. TJ Rosendich, the question for the open forum. From this time to the end, we can already send in your questions. I believe our facilitators 1, 2, and 3 are also available to be messaged in our chat box. So if you have already your question prepared, kindly send it to only to our facilitators 1, 2, or 3. All
I'll be
right.
right back.
All right. All right, there it is. Our evaluation and attendance forms are on our chat box already. So okay. As we go through, as we fill out the attendance forms and the evaluation forms, we'll be flashing videos for everyone. Sure. Thank you, everyone. We can already see your informations on the attendance form and evaluation forms. For the meantime, we'll be having our 10-minute break for everyone and to gather the questions for our open forum later. So please, if you're done filling out our evaluation and attendance forms, you may have your 10-minute break.
Did you know that years ago,
Hey, Henry, are you there?
call for a comprehensive and unified policy and program for Philippine sports, various sectors of the country? Sounds familiar? Yes or no? Here's all you need to know about the National Sports Summit 2021, a project which is pinned on a similar endeavor held in Baguio City in 1992 via Executive Order Number 27, which created a 38-point resolution to guide Philippine sports. Fast forward to 2019, under the guidance of Philippine Sports Commission Chairman William Ramirez, PSC started planning a project which would help present and future sports leaders to have a well-studied guide on the direction the sports community need to take. Crafted by the stakeholders themselves, with a theme of sports convergence symbolizing the coming together of minds and interest from different stakeholders from various parts of the country, united in the goal of coming up with measures to better Philippine sports, a sports convergence. The NSS 2021 is a three-phase project aimed to gather data on different aspects touching the sporting community, process and study these information, and craft a research-based resolution which will serve as a guideline for the advancement of Philippine sporting community. Let's jump right into the first phase of the project. Starting this January 27, Sports Conversations is a weekly online conference featuring different sports topics aimed to provide both learning and awareness on the present situation of sports. As
again, as we're announcing that our attendance forms and evaluation forms are already in the chat box, so you may fill that out. Also, our facilitators 1, 2, and 3 are also available to be messaged in the chat box section here, so that you can send in your questions as we gather that for the open forum after this 10-minute break. So please take this time for a water break, a bio break, and etc. And later will be, I think our moderator will be calling some of our participants here to ask questions. All right. Again, thanks everyone for your active participation. We are now currently receiving the information for the attendance forms and evaluation forms. Again, it's very important for all of you to fill this out. This will be the basis of your presence for today and for our session certificate. And as I've mentioned earlier, there will be a certificate for each session and a special completion certificate for those who would be able to attend all our 4 sessions. I think if you've been updating and checking out our PSC social media accounts as well as our website, the coming dates will be we're already flashed. The first batch of speakers and topics were already flashed on our website as well as on our social media accounts. So and the next dates will be very excited to be with you there for our second session. So I think for our second, third, and fourth session, I think everyone will be familiarized already with our program. Okay. Again, you can also send in your questions now for our open forum discussion. You may send it to our facilitators 1, 2, or 3 in the chat back session. And yeah, we'll now move forward. I think most of us have already taken their break. Also, you can also send in your questions and comments as well. If you've been listening to the discussion of Dr. TJ Rosendich, there's so many insights and discussions that we may raise here to our open forum discussions. Okay. I think we're good to go. May I call on again our moderator, Professor Henry Daut. Prof,
Okay, so thank you very much, Joas. And I know many questions are coming in, but for those three lucky participants who posted their first question, you will be given the opportunity to ask personally our resource speaker. So that's a very good incentive for quick thinking and listening intently so that you can craft your questions to our speaker. So I would like to call Mr. Vince Wico of Mindshare Philippines to ask our resource speaker on the question that he would like to answer. Mr. Vince Wico?
Vince, Mr. Vince Wico, if you're around, can you please
Yeah.
raise your hand? All
Please.
right.
Good morning, Professor. Good morning. Good evening, Dr. Rosenich. My question is, I have two questions. What are your thoughts on the U.S. women's football team, national team, their efforts for equal pay or equal benefits to those of the men? What are your thoughts on that?
I think Dr. Rosendich is currently on mute. All right.
All right. Well, I never muted myself, but anyway, someone did that for me. I have been following the litigation on that, and the initial rulings by the court have basically eliminated a substantial part of the case of the women that had filed it. If you reduce the numbers and you look at it, the women were actually getting a larger percentage of the gross revenue of the federation than the men were. And it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. There is vast differences in revenue, the numbers of games played, other kinds of licensing things and what have you. The part that hasn't been resolved yet is to some indirect things such as team support on areas such as travel, coaching, and some things of that nature. So while it's been partially resolved, it's still a long ways from being totally resolved. I can say that generally speaking, that the United States has very strong equal opportunity laws and rules, and that's what Title IX was all about. You know, Title IX legislation is what allowed the women's soccer team to get to the prominence that it has, but that was something that took place over decades. But when you get down granularly, down into the weeds, there's substantial differences that really avoid an apples to apples comparison, if you know what I mean by apples to apple, a direct comparison.
Right. Last question, Professor. Last question, if I may. Dr. Rosendich, I'm going to be digressing a bit. I'd like to ask you if you follow Alabama football.
Do I? Of course. I mean, is the grass green? Is the sky blue?
Okay. With the departure of urban mayor for the NFL, does that make it easier for you guys to repeat as national champions?
Now, if who you are breaking up, if who goes to the NFL?
Urban mayor.
Well, I don't think that had a lot to do with it. Alabama was just tough. Nick Saban has built a dynasty. And how has he done that? He has done that through a combination of really getting first-class players, and he's built a conveyor belt of bringing talent to the team. He, every year in, year out, he finds the best high school players and recruits them to come to Alabama, and then he grows them. The first couple of years, very few get to play at the varsity level. but in the last couple of years, then they're outstanding. So he has built a system to perpetuate the Alabama football team that really has been unequaled by most of the other coaches in college football. It's a total proposition. And to digress just a little bit, one of the impacts on COVID is recruiting. When I was talking with my board member from the University of Texas, one of the ways that they cut expenses was recruiting trips and bringing people in and what have you to try and reduce expenses. So here again, indirectly, the pandemic has affected the way that sports are going to be done in the future. But I don't think Urban Meyer had much to do with, Nick Saban winning.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Sir
Dr. Thank you,
Vince.
Professor.
Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
TJ. Now, I have a question that is forwarded by the Executive Director of the Philippine Sports Commission, and he wanted me to read it. So this is his question, Attorney Guillermo Iroy. The executive orders recently signed by President Joe Biden, while it did not specifically address transgendered women in sports, the order might open the possibility for states and federal courts. What's this? Must states and federal laws and policies to be challenged in court, which could lead to transgender women competing on women's sports team or individual sports. What is your view on this subject?
Well, two things. The way that the executive director is interpreting the regulation, basically, the way that it's being implemented by what is called the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, which is built into the U.S. Department of Education, that transgenders are going to be given the right to participate. There is no exclusion for sexual orientation. And what they mean by that is I'm a biological male, but I sometimes think I'm a female. The bottom line is that it's been widely interpreted that it does open the door to that. There already is litigation, and there's going to be more of it. It's not going to be resolved easily, and it's going to take years to do, because between the time that you file a case and it reaches the Supreme Court in the United States is measured in years, not months. But in the meantime, women's sports, I believe, are going to be damaged unless there is some mitigation or reduction in the scope of the rule as it was promulgated.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that response. Now we go to the third question by asking Joanne Gracia from the University of East Manila to personally ask her question. Joanne Gracia, can we have Miss Joanne Gracia? Joas?
All right, there she is,
Okay.
Prof. Go ahead, Miss
There you
Joanne.
go. Hi. Good afternoon. Good morning to everyone. Dr. Rosandich, good evening.
Good evening.
Personally,
Morning.
personally, I would want to know your take on youth sports. What would be the better path for you? Is it diversification or early specialization?
I personally believe it's diversification. And I was doing consulting work for the government of Bahrain, and we were actually helping them to plan the implementation of an interscholastic sport program. And one of the precepts that we used was that there was a need to take a seasonal approach. And you'll see that in American interscholastic sport, there's a distinct fall season, a winter season, and a spring season. And the reason for that is, as I explained to the officials there, that I would rather, as a youngster, be on the football team because that's the most popular sport. I would rather sit on the bench and be able to say, I'm a member of the football team than perhaps they may be a star in basketball or volleyball or in athletics. If you run football the whole year, then that person will sit there with not being able to expand and see if he has skills in other sports or other opportunities. And I can go back to my own days when I was an athlete in secondary school. I participated in three sports every, one in the fall, one in the winter, and one in the spring, and I was better for it. So, by and large, diversification is, in my opinion, a far better approach.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
You
Thank
bet.
you very much. And it's really true that when we open opportunities for students to explore possibilities, then we have better chances of identifying potential athletes. So thank you very much. And we have one question from Sir Ramiro Alvarez Jr. from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and the National Kidney and Transplant Institute. Can we request Ramiro Alvarez? Okay. Joas?
All right, I think Prof, our tech supporter, is already finding
Yeah.
Sir Almiro. Kindly bear with us on this. This would really
Yeah,
take
it's very
time. Prof.
interesting to note that
Find his attendance form and mark him absent.
that's very true. DJ has opened the secrets of success of the United States, and we have to take advantage of what we can learn from him outside of his presentation. So, do we have Sir Ramiro? Okay,
Yes, sir.
Ramiro.
All, sir.
How you doing?
It's fine, sir.
Okay.
Good evening. Good evening to you, sir, Dr. Rosandich.
Yeah.
So I just like to ask, how do you address the LGBTQ plus community to sports industry?
What, in the sport industry?
Yeah.
One of the absolute strengths of the United States as a whole is we know how to market. We know how to sell things. Americans are very creative individuals. And to the extent that people who have products to sell, whether it is participating in, say, the gay games, and there is such a thing in the United States, by the way, or apparel designed and colored for the gay community or what have you, there's going to be people that'll produce what it is that they think that they can sell in the marketplace. So just like I said that, American inventors have already figured out a way to mitigate the spread of COVID in sport venues and in spectator areas, which to me is the key to bringing people back to the stadiums. So too, so long as there's a market there for that, there's going to be people that'll figure out a way to exploit it. And it's only limited by the creativity of the entrepreneurs that are going to do it.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for that question, and thank you, TJ, for your answer. And now we have one more from IKBF, Reynaldo Del Prado. Can we put him in?
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good morning.
I just yeah, good morning. My name is Ray, and Dr. TJ, you mentioned about esports. Just want to know, and this is also a question for our beloved DepEd Secretary. Is there a possibility to include esports in our sports program or school curriculum?
Boy, that question was really garbled on this side. So if you could re-ask it for me, please.
Oh, for a while, sir.
I didn't understand the question because it wasn't transmitted clearly.
Can you
Alright.
repeat? Can you repeat your question, sir?
How about, all right. Dr. TJ mentioned about esports.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a possibility? Actually, this is also a question for our beloved Deputy Secretary. Is there a possibility to include esports in our sports program or school curriculum?
Yeah. Uh, the fact of the matter is, esports are here to stay. It's they're not going to go away. The explosive growth of esports assures that eventually it will be a global phenomenon, and we recognize that here at the academy. We've already developed esport management programs. We have a non-degree post-secondary program. If you go to our website, you can see the courses that we're offering in that. But we've been approached by other universities in the United States on collaborating on esport programs. Now, there's a lot of controversy. For example, the NFHS that governs high school sport, they are not uh, enthused. They're not eager to do esports in the secondary schools. They say that the problem with obesity in the United States, which is a very severe problem, you really want to get kids involved in sport participation that has a physical component to it. You want them to get out and run around, kick the ball, and do those things. They don't think you need another activity that's going to keep people sitting in a chair exercising their thumbs. So certainly at the collegiate level, colleges and universities are giving scholarships. There's organized intercollegiate competitions, and it's only a matter of time before you'll see esports in the Asian Games and maybe even the Olympics, but not right away.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Sir Del
All right,
Prado,
thank you.
and also TJ. We have a question here from Neil Patrick Ferrer of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. What do you think are the pros and cons of the school system or government system sports development? And which one do you think would be best for Philippine sports?
Well, I have to say that I honestly believe, to the extent that you can get interscholastic sport built into the school system, the better overall result you're going to have. And there's two reasons for that. Number one is that school is universal. Everybody's got to go to school. If the kids don't go to school, the parents, they go to jail. So you're going to be touching everybody in society to get them into one place at one time. Okay. The next thing is that if you look at resources, a simple matter of resources, when the government is handing out money, education's at the front of the line and sports is probably somewhere near the back of the line. And if you looked at the performance pyramid that I put up, you saw that by leveraging the resources of the school system, almost $1 billion is going into the feeder system for just track and field in the United States. To the extent that you can get track and field at the intercollegiate level, there was another almost $1 billion that is being paid for by the universities. But it all accrues to the benefit of athletics within the United States. So, as a matter of resources, at both financial and people, the school system really is the ideal way to go. Now, if you can't do that, then you have another set of problems with which you're going to have to contend.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you very much. And finally, we have one last question to be asked by Miss Malin Bamba. Can we have her?
Here are some results from the web.
Prof. Henry, I think the question should be read. I think po.
It should be read. Okay.
Alright, thank you. Thank you po.
The question is, what is your view in today's modern sports activity that limits the movement of sports not only in the US but the entire globe due to COVID-19, not to mention the mutation effect of the virus, which is more lethal in terms of the infection?
That's a loaded question. Well, let me tell you something. I've seen literature that within the United States, for example, they're expecting what they call herd immunity to be reached by maybe September of this coming year. The real problem there is that if herd immunity is not reached by September, what's going to happen with the Olympic Games in July? That's a real question. I think that people are going to figure it out. I already mentioned that there is mechanical devices to try and mitigate the spread of the virus in crowded spaces by the use of intense light. The photons eliminate the ability of the virus to connect to the human cells. There's already a serum vaccine that's being distributed, and in the United States right now, about 1 million people a day are getting the vaccination. So, to the extent that the vaccine actually works, you're going to be building herd immunity in that respect. And the last part is that where the vaccination, is a prophylaxis, it prevents the onset of the disease. I believe that there are other medications that will do the same thing, like hydroxychloroquine. And there's another drug that's coming out of Australia. In fact, I'll send you the little video piece that I saw on it through Messenger if you want to see it, Henry. Basically, that would be able to treat COVID infections early onset within 24 to 48 hours, provided the oxygen levels of the patient doesn't drop below 50%. So there's a multi-pronged approach, to deal with it. And we will get there. I think it's going to happen within this calendar year, but not as soon as I would like or anyone would like. And it's going to impact events and the movement of athletes and spectators between global events such as the Olympics or regional events like the SEA Games, until all three of those things converge and come together to mitigate it. I can't hear you.
Thank you very much for the insights you have shared, and we would like to inform our participants that due to time constraints and the need for us to wrap up this launching of the Sports Summit, we would like to inform you that all your questions will be taken in and will be considered in the planning of the committee that will craft the different plans that we will present in another summit again after the series of this presentation. So today we are very thankful. The Philippine sports, all the stakeholders are very grateful to Dr. TJ Rosenditz for sharing to us the secrets of sports success of the United States. You have helped unlock the doors towards sports development opportunities that we can explore. And Dr. TJ has given important points to ponder about and act, and he highlighted the impact of urbanization. That means we need to improve facilities, infrastructure within our communities, the need for improving the economic life of the middle income so that they can spend more, and of course, the need to provide more leisure time and more leisure activities to our population. He also shared one of the secrets of sports development in the US, and that is through the school system. And he has discussed it extensively during the question and answer. And I know the Department of Education is listening today, and also the other, the Commission on Higher Education, in terms of making sure that the inputs learned from this presentation will be considered in their future planning. And with the pandemic, we have a lot of time to plan and shape the future of sports in the Philippines through the school system. And his presentation also on the performance pyramid and the model of scholastic-based sports feeder system clearly defined the pathway for a sports development program, from grassroots to elite, from grassroots to greatness. And he emphasized the need to work closely in developing a very sound interscholastic sports program. And I think we can look into the sample of the US in terms of how they've scheduled their sports competition. And finally, he said that it is important to make a strategy if we want to win more medals. We need to emphasize more on women, where competition is even, especially with our women. And I know that we have similar data wherein women in the Philippines are having more medals compared to men. And of course, the possibility of PSC making some influence in the sports program, especially in the elite level, so that we can strengthen our sports. And finally, he emphasized the need for youth sports participation, because he said sports prepare the youth for a better life. So thank you very much, Dr. TJ, for that very wonderful presentation. We hope we could hold you more. And by the way, to all the participants and all those who are viewing in the Facebook page of PSC, we would like to inform you that PSC and USSA, through Dr. Rosandich and Sir William Ramirez, is forging an understanding to implement a sports program here in the Philippines to prepare, to strengthen, and make our sports leaders, sports coaches, sports physical educators become better and competitive in the world by having the programs, the certificate programs, diploma programs of the USSA brought to our country. And I think the present pandemic will allow us to have some kind of a virtual program, and hopefully it will be launched soon, and we would like to keep you posted. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I know you're a very busy man, and we are very grateful for making this a very special day launching for our sports summit. Thank you very much.
TJ,
Joas?
thank you. Thank you, TJ. Warm regards to the family.
Yep, thank you very much, Butch.
See
Jan
you.
says her regards.
See
She
you in
watched
March.
the opening on the Facebook. She
See
came
you
in
in
there and said, that's great.
See you in March for the launching of our.
All righty. I hope.
All right.
Well,
you bet.
All right.
Yeah,
All right. Thank
bye-bye
you.
now.
All right. Dr. TJ Rosandich, can you please wait for a moment? We'll be having our awarding ceremonies.
Oh,
Again, thank you to
okay.
Professor Henry Daut for that cohesive open forum and session synthesis. As I said earlier, those questions that will not be answered, all of it will be included in our data gathering. So no data will be wasted in this session. All of it will be included in our research. We will now take this time to honor and award the certificate of appreciation to our first speaker for
excuse
sports
me,
conferences.
Josh.
Yes, Chairman, go ahead.
I think it would be good for TJ to meet our chairman of the Sports Committee of Congress. Congressman Nito is there. TJ, he is our
Yes.
young chair. And keep with us and listening to you. You will have a load of things to do in Congress.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll download it, inshallah, and put it in a frame and hang it in my office.
All right. And to present, again, to award the certificate to Dr. Rosandich, may I call the presence of PSC Chairman William Ramirez to be joined by Congressman Yul Servo Nieto. Here, flashed on our screen, Chairman, is the certificate of appreciation.
Okay. This certificate, together with Congressman Nieto, certificate of appreciation is presented to our good friend, TJ Rosandich, who have been contributing relentlessly to Philippine sports. We have an unfinished project, and that will be launched on March for the success of this sports summit, where he delivered the first World Perspective session this morning. Dr.
Well, thank you very much.
This is our unique way of giving your appreciation via virtual. Thank you so much. Together with
Well, thank you. I'm really appreciative of that. And on behalf of the United States Sports Academy, we're looking forward to being continued service to Philippine sport. As you know, I have a personal relationship, as Henry will attest, that goes back to the 1980s. And I work very closely with Filipinos in the Middle East for more than a decade. And so there's a special place in my heart for all of you there in the archipelago. So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Okay. Before we close, Josh, we will give time to Congressman Nieto to say something and perhaps invite Dr. TJ Rosanitz in Congress soon. In March, we are scheduling a March engagement with Dr. TJ. Congressman, you have a few minutes to speak.
Maraming salamat po, Chairman, at sa lahat po ng naririto po ngayon. Basta po ang committee po ay nakasuporta po para sa larangan po ng sport youth sa pagde-develop po sa kanila. Maasahan niyo po kami. Salamat po at magiging isang inspirasyon ko po itong araw na ito para sa trabaho ko po at invite po natin si Dr. TJ Rosandich po. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. Well, I recognize Dr. TJ Rosandich in that speech. Anyway, thank you.
Again, thank you very much to our speaker, Dr. TJ Rosandich. We have come to the end of our first session. Again, congratulations to all our participants and our stakeholders who joined us. Maraming salamat po. Give yourselves a round of applause, everyone. A virtual round of applause.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you to our VIPs, Chairman William Ramirez, our commissioners, Commissioner Aldo Agustin, Celia Kiram, Charles Maxi, and Ramon Fernandez. To everyone, our PSA officials joining us today. Maraming salamat po. And to all of you taking your time for this momentous day in Philippine sports, let us continue to converse, collaborate, and work together in unity for the advancement of Philippine sports. Mabuhay! And see you all on our next session on February 4. Maraming salamat po.
Warm regards to the faculty of USSA.
Maraming
I will do that. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Maraming salamat po. Again,
thank you, maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Again, we are also announcing that for those who haven't yet, our attendance and evaluation forms are also still in the chat box. For those of you, will give you time to finish before signing out of our first session. You may fill out our evaluation and attendance forms. Maraming salamat po. And also, we are flashing the next dates for for this second session of Sports Conversations. I think we're already flashing the next dates on February. All right, I think we'll be having a sessions. Our second session will be on February 4. Third is on February 11, and the last would be on February 18 for the first batch of our speakers. If you are now done, you may sign out already on this Zoom link. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. And for those who haven't, our evaluation and attendance forms are still available in the chat box. Thank you very much for your active participation, everyone. Magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat.